afternoon. Apologies, I think I was 1 minute late there. My name's Jude, and I'm going to be going into getting the most out of your internal audits, which is, I think, is slightly different to the title that we put out, which was to related to identifying findings during your internal audits. But this is a subject that I could literally do with about 3 days to cover, so I've tried to put it all into 45 minutes. So if you've not been with NQA before or heard of us, you can have some confidence in what we're delivering. So we're in the top 3 in the UK for quality, environment, health and safety and info security, and globally #1 for telecommunications in the automotive sector. We do certification and training services as well. So if there's something that you want to get your teeth into, maybe a new standard or improve your knowledge of what you already have, feel free to get in touch with the training people. They're very nice, and we cover the world. I haven't got time to sell for training today, unfortunately, because there is literally so much to cover in order for you to get value out of this webinar. So I'll very, very quickly introduce myself. As I say, I'm Jude. I'm the Technical and Projects Manager for NQA UK, and a large part of one of my core responsibilities is to do the internal auditing for NQA. So fellow internal auditors, I do feel your pain. It can be an uphill battle and sometimes, you know, feel like a very hard job. Of course, with our programme, we audit globally, sometimes remotely, sometimes in person, depending on the need, I suppose, and the risk of the audit. And we'll talk about that as we go through. I will be sending a copy of the slides, and the webinar is being recorded as well. Sorry, a question just flew in there. Hopefully the webinar will keep to about the 45-minute mark. Put questions in the chat box, but I'm not likely to see them until the end. And as I say, after the webinar is finished, you will get a circulation of it shortly, and you can have a record of what we're talking about then. So as I say, there's loads to cover today. Certainly a question when I've been out on the road in the field that has caught a lot of time. Why do we have to do internal audits? Not sure what I'm meant to be getting out of it. And many times as well, we'll go and see clients and they've met the standard because they've put together a documented internal audit plan, and they've also completed that plan. But very often there's no findings, and we can't raise a finding for you not having findings. But if I give you an idea of when I do an internal audit, and my boss does as well, he's another internal auditor, and we only have other internal auditor for the company, we generally, on average, in fact, I don't even know of one audit we've done where we've not found something. Part of that is due to the fact that we block out a good amount of time for the audits. We don't scratch the surface. We really try and deep dive on them. And I'm going to give you a few top tips really of how we operate, how we do it, and hopefully how that can become useful into your business, and we can get rid of just ostensibly a paper exercise, because it can feel like that, and that's not lost on us. So we're going to understand how to get the most out of the mandatory element of the internal audits. I'm going to teach you hopefully how to plan effectively for them, and then we're going to go through how we're going to improve them and how we're going to use the information that we get out of that internal audit itself. So there's no shame here whatsoever. We need to think about why you want the standard that you're certified for. And this is key, because when we understand the why of what we want something, we know a little better what sort of questions to ask and where to find the answers for those questions. So top 3 answers that I've generally got over the years of being on the road. And again, there's no shame. All of us are here ostensibly so that we can earn a little bit of money and pay the bills, and obviously give to our favourite person, the taxman, So a lot of people want to be certified because they feel it increases their earning opportunity. So it might be a case of it opens markets for them. It might be a case of through looking at the processes, they can cut down costs, therefore increase earning opportunity. Some people, they literally want the certificates because it's a requirement for their customers. No shame in that whatsoever. Other people want it because it's a step towards improvement within their company. So those are the top 3 reasons. If you've got a different one, I'd love to hear it, because that would help me improve how I put these things together in the future. So if your reason for wanting it is an increased earning opportunity, I've spent quite a little bit of time getting bogged down in the weeds researching this webinar to try and give you not just anecdotal stories about how to do it and what I think is the best way. I've tried to back it up with a little bit of evidence, and I've been absolutely delighted to find that it is a scientific fact, if you will, that research does suggest that questions and talking through processes is a verifiable way to produce ideas. So particularly in design projects and in operational activities of manufacture and engineering or marketing, there's a lot of research which has found that when you sit and talk about something, it does improve the creative juices. It can be the most random conversation as well. It doesn't have to be a structured why do you do this? How did you do that? Blah, 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 blah. What it does sort of talk about is that the best earning opportunities can come from something as simple as a change in life event. So an internal audit is an ideal opportunity to actually speak with people who are using the process, get conversations going, and that is generally a way that you will find new products, new processes, and new ways of doing business. Now, if you were to allocate an hour with somebody, you're probably not going to get such an effective conversation and quite an effective digging deep. That makes no sense. Apologies. Deep dive on that. And it's also through that process as well that you might find that your audit focus can identify waste. So what I'm meaning by waste is time wasting. You know, have we got things in place that don't really need to be there? Have we got lots of documents that are duplicated that many people are doing several times? These are genuine things that we find in audits, and it's quite important to cut all of that out, which can save time and money, therefore frees people up to actually create new ideas and needs within the business. If it's a requirement that you want your certification, you might need it for tenders or contracts. Again, that comes back to increased earning opportunity, or it could just be a very smart way of not wasting lots of time on supplier forms, because they seem to be now a little bit like the brownies or the scouts. How many badges have you got? Don't pass go unless you've got 40 hours to fill out a form without a certificate. You might genuinely want improvement as well. So you might want to look at the generation of moving processes forward, of streamlining or expanding, or you might just simply want the value of the accountability for the product, service, or the ethos. So when you think about why you want your certificate, we want to think about how we optimize that through an audit. So we might want to look at, in particular, how much time do we waste? We might want to look at KPI monitoring. We might want to look at resource focus, risk prioritization, stagnation, and supplier analysis is always a good one to choose. A lot of the businesses that we go into will say they have no findings. It's that all of their processes are working perfectly well, and there's no issue. And so they don't raise non-conformities because either any issues that they've had don't affect the customer, or it's not been detrimental to their process. So if we think about what they're saying there, and you might be one of them on the call at the moment, you're not saying that your system has 100% conformed. What you're doing is word salad with your process. So, okay, it might not have affected your customer, but that doesn't mean your process hasn't been affected. And it doesn't mean it's been thoroughly followed. And if it's not been thoroughly followed, then it's not conformed. So we should really include little issues like this within the audit. It is important, and we'll go into why. Similarly, when we talk about complaints, very few companies will say that they have complaints, and they're not, complaints aren't bad things. Everybody has them and everybody has to deal with them, and we can get a lot of value from what customers tell us, whether it's good or not particularly nice to hear. Again, it's a word salad. Or what is a complaint? What does a customer consider as bad? We're not non-conforming, or we deal with things straight away. So it doesn't need to be something that we need to deal with, but get too tied up in administration and so on and so forth. But the important thing is that really you should be raising a non-conformance, because it's not, your system isn't performing as it should be. So it's not realistic. There's probably, off the top of my head, 5 people or 5 companies that I've worked with in the 5.5 years I've been auditing third party, that I could say hand on heart their system is so mature and they have got such long-standing employees and excellent processes that I probably wouldn't expect to see non-conformances, and I trust there aren't any. We have to get rid of the negativity of it, and we have to dig a little bit deeper. So there's no badge for having the most non-conformances within your business at all, or within your system, but it is not realistic to think that everything is performing so perfectly that you're not going to get them. So by doing the audit itself, and we want to find out what we want to know to optimize that. These are just ideas that I've got here, but it's your company, it's your system, so you'll have a better idea of what it is that you do want to interrogate and what you do actually want to find out from that itself. So key things that in particular say we look at when we do our internal audits is in terms of your KPIs, your threats and your opportunities. Are we actually looking at the right threats and opportunities? Are we aware of internal threats within the business? And sometimes those internal threats may well be that we've got people in wrong places, or that, you know, we need to recruit somebody else, but actually they're already within the business. So when you bring people on board, of course, nobody is expected to memorize people's CVs, but unless you're interacting amongst the crowd and getting that buy-in from the people that you work with, you know, you can have geniuses that maybe aren't employed to do what you need them to do now, but there's movement, and it's helpful to have that and give people more responsibility, or replace them to do something that they might be better at elsewhere. Supplier analysis is probably not something that we look at in too much detail, but even stationery, now that the cost of living, prices going up, everything has shot through the roof in some respects, hasn't it? So when I speak to clients, and we've gone through COVID now, haven't we? And everybody was perfectly understanding and willing to wait 3 to 10 weeks maybe for supplies and things to come through. But now we maybe need to go back a little bit to the old normal, that it's not good enough, and if we can't get what we need on time, what are we doing about it? Appreciate not every situation, if you're relying on one supply chain, that you can say fine, I'll go somewhere else. But the pressure now needs to start coming on perhaps a little bit more, and perhaps by looking at, is it a poor service, or is it because we've got lazy for acceptance, or is there actually an issue in supply chain, and what's it actually costing the business might be something that's useful for you. Equally, if it's just a certificate requirement, you want to know, do we meet the standard? And if we don't, we're not going to have our certificate. So our why for wanting the certificate becomes a moot point, because you won't have it. But you want to be able to get ahead of if there's going to be an external non-conformance that's likely to be raised. You don't want that, because of course it's going to give you more cost if we have to come out again and do a special visit. And then have you got the capacity to deal with findings? So for example, if you've not done an effective internal audit and you've not found things before us, then it's quite likely that you'll be hit with a lot of problems at once, and then you've got a time frame to get issues sorted, and it can put a bit of a strain on some businesses. If you're just wanting improvement, might be better place to work, more robust processes, structure, steps to the next level, or managing that change, then those are the sort of questions that you are wanting to ask, and that is really the measure of what you're wanting to see. Where do we go from there, and what data can we extract to make that successful? So now we know why we want the certificate, we can plan our audits with some key objectives which will help us extract hopefully some findings and help us improve our system. So of course the first thing that you need to consider when planning your audit is what the standard requires itself. So you want to make sure that you're hitting those requirements. You want to know what you actually want to know, so to speak, so the information which might be useful for you. You want to know what core processes that you want to test. And I use the word test on the basis that it's fine to have lots of written procedures, and it's fine to think, well, everything works generally okay. And I can say that because we've had no complaints, and I can say that because nothing dreadful's happened. We're still operating, we're in business, we have cash coming in every month. But if you actually observe your key processes or your core processes, watch how people work, get a flavour of the day-to-day, which sounds quite obvious, but we don't often do it, and test it against what processes you have in place, you might actually find we don't always do it how we're supposed to, which isn't a bad thing. We might have a better way of doing it, or we might be missing something which would make people's lives easier, or the product better, or the customer service improved. You also want to consider the highest risk as well within your audit plan. So if you know there's an area of risk, perhaps your customer service doesn't receive great feedback on something like Trustpilot, or however you capture feedback, that there might be bits in there that you need to improve, or perhaps it seems to be happening a lot actually, key ingredients have been changed in materials that you used, and they're not maybe performing as well as they used to, and it's something you've picked up through quality inspection, or it might be feedback again from customers. You might say that's a high risk area which you want to focus on first. So the order on which you do your audits is really useful for you, because of course your high risk area, you don't want to spend the same amount of time on that as you would say reviewing a quality policy, because that doesn't make sense. So allowing yourself enough time to do that deep dive is really critical in getting an effective audit. Because when you think about it, your external auditor who comes in, we've got a day, 2 days, 3 days to go through a large system that we see once a year. Whereas the people using your system and your systems you might have created, you should be able to go a lot deeper and have that understanding of why things were originally in place and how we maybe look to improve those. It's also really critical to have the people that you need to speak to within that internal audit. So it might be the case that at the moment you can go through an office, or you can go on the shop floor and say, okay, show me what you're doing. Do you have a process? Do we follow it? Yeah, I can see you've got a work order. Yeah, I can see that. Okay, job done. That's fine. But it would be useful from your perspective to know as well what the process owner knows, and as well as the process users, users. So what do I mean by that? So this on the right here, this is one of our procedures. It's actually the complaints procedure. You can access it on our website. And so the process owner is myself for that. So as the process owner, I am accountable for the process and daily implementation of this complaints process. So it's critical that if this process is to be audited, that I'm present, because I can ask, well, I should be able to answer questions on it, and I should know what's in that process, and I should know how to manage it. The approver is Steve Russell, so that's our Global Accreditation Director. So he might not have to use this every day, but he's the person that will take accountability for the content of the process. So there's a bit of control there. If I want to change something within our process, that's not a problem, but it has to be signed off, it has to be approved, there has to be a control there. And it's important that both people on the bottom of these documents understand what their responsibility is within that process itself. So although we manage it, other people have to use it, and we have to deliver various documents, and they have to send various documents back depending on what the complaint is. And it's I have to say, it's not a process we have to use very often either. So it is something that's useful to have written down. But oversight of the use of the process is a good measure internally as to how it's working, but the internal audit should question it, challenge it, and find any aspect of that that's non-compliant. And that's really what you need to be doing with your processes as well. So, as part of your plan, and something which I've found useful in the past, let's consider it as a live document. So getting people out of the business to take part in an audit is always going to be met with people who haven't got time, don't want to do it, don't understand it, and feel that this is just a witch hunt and it's all terrible and it's awful. So if people haven't got time to take part in the exercise, personally, I would consider that a risk in itself. And when we start thinking about planning the audit on a risk basis, this can help us form part of our plan so that we can get more out of this. So I've made this up. There's no information taken from anywhere but my own brain with this, but things which might be useful for you. So one of your risks might be a lack of buy-in from an auditee. That risk might happen because they don't always understand improvements. It can be seen as a negative exercise. And then the effect of that is that everybody wastes their time, really, and would be no further forward with improvements that we're trying to make from the business. The best people to audit in your business are the ones who will show you where the bodies are buried, and the ones who want things to get better. That's a key thing. either they just want to throw everybody under the bus or they understand the reasoning behind doing internal audits. Either way, they're good to speak to. You might find another risk that the people that you need aren't available. And I've put that's because of a time factor. Again, you might want to look at that as a risk if they haven't got time to be able to do that. They might be on holiday. So the effect of that might be that they're not able to discuss a full process or a deficiency within that process. So if you haven't got that process owner and you haven't got the person that's been involved in that process writing and taking responsibility, and you haven't got a process user, you're not going to get a full picture of the pie. And that's the danger of internal auditing. Often what we do is we speak to one person. That person is often very competent at that process, and that person generally only uses that process. There's not a lot going on outside of that. That's why you want to speak to them, because they're good at it and they'll know about it. By having that mix of people, and this goes back to leadership as well in the standards, by having that accountability, you're also hitting extra points within the standard there, and it's good evidence to show your auditor, but it also ties it up and links it for yourselves as well. So we're not wanting to catch people out. What we're wanting to identify is where we can improve, and we might need to train. We might have a training issue, or we might just have a really old process that has little bits in it that are totally useless now. Another risk is not finding a major problem, and then the external auditor comes in, and we do. And that might be because you're not confident, or there's not enough material available, or we've not had enough training as an internal auditor. Of course, the effect of that is closeout costs, potential costs of special visits, and it makes us reactive rather than proactive, which again has its own little hidden costs and is going to cost you money. And it doesn't matter really if something needs fixing, whether it's my £5, your £5, NQA's £5, or £5 from the lottery. £5 is £5, and it's going somewhere, isn't it? So we need to rein that in and not have that as a concern for us. So it's a complex risk really, because I often find personally that when I don't know something about a process, I do a better audit. Because I don't know, I ask far more questions than I would do before. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, this particular one. And the other aspect of it as well, if you're up against somebody who has been in the business a long time and don't take improvement suggestions very well, it can be a little bit intimidating for an internal auditor as well. But part of the reason why I'm saying to you, create a risk register of the audit plan, is that if you need support from those above, because you can't raise non-conformances, it's become a political exercise rather than there is a problem with the system. I know there's a problem with the system, but I can't raise the problem within the system because of difficulties. It's something that you've already highlighted and something that you can evidence to the senior management as an anticipation. And you've also got a rationale of risk there as well. So it should enable you, theoretically, to be able to have some input in process improvement there. We've covered that. Okay, good. So the other thing you need to do, which you all know, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, is that once we've risk assessed where we need to go with the internal audit, and we've identified potentially what possibly we might find in risk areas, we need to put communications out. So a risk I would say in 99.9% of businesses, is the first one that we looked at, and that's lack of buy-in from the auditee. And it's because people generally don't understand about the improvements, and internal auditing can be seen as a negative exercise. Of course, when we raise things, people then have to fix them. So we are automatically as well increasing people's workloads. Of course, the idea is once we've done that, things should be easier for them. But by putting a communication out to the company, to the departments, as a nice friendly invitation, perhaps if you are cordially invited to the internal audit this year, this is the date it will be happening, and these are the people that I require there. You can also plan around the best times for your business to do it. So when people aren't on holiday, when maybe, see, this is a complex thing as well. As an external auditor, I want to come to your business at the busiest time because that's a true reflection of how well your system copes. This is something that I want to see. But as an internal audit, you're not going to want to do that, because then you're not going to get a good time with your auditee, because they're thinking about what's happening outside and they need to get back to it, and they're just thinking of all the jobs that are stacking up whilst we're sat chatting about processes. So it's good maybe also to talk to the people who you're going to want in there. And so we know that's going to be the process owner, process approver, and a process user. So that's 3 people out the business. When is good for them? When is going to be less stressful for them to do that? So your plan doesn't have to be pretty for the audit, but you do need it to be documented. And I don't know who Jade is, but I sometimes get called Jade, so I just thought I'd throw that in there for a bit of show impartiality of auditor as well. So the audit itself, this is where we get to the good stuff really, is how you're going to find these improvements. So again, if you're not making findings, you're not asking the right questions, and you're not digging deep enough. If after all this, you still can't make any findings, maybe you're as wonderful as you think you are, but I would probably say definitely the majority of businesses, if we took a bit more of a approach and followed these little tips, you will find something and you will have something to correct, and it will improve your business. So left side of the screen, we've got gold audit questions and how to get information from people. And on the right, we've got waste of time. So when you approach the auditee, and you don't need to know the process. Some people feel more confident knowing the entire process and swatting up on that before they go in. I'm just used to knowing nothing and asking enough questions to interrogate. As I say, when you start really questioning because you actually genuinely don't know, you actually find you do get findings because the person you're asking doesn't know either and nothing's clear about the process. So that can be how it works. But if you ask the person to explain the process as you understand me and show me how it works, the key, as I've found out, to really effective internal auditing is do not trust anybody. Do not take anybody's word for it. And that's not out of malice. It's not because our employees and colleagues lie. It's just generally we're all so busy, we think we've done something and maybe we haven't. So tell me how it works and show me how it works, and then let's have a look at the process you should be following and see, does it match up? Is it the same? And there we go. We might find automatically that it's not, or that it's an old process, and automatically you then have a finding or an opportunity to improve. Go through that process. Don't rush it. Take your time. And so I might say, okay, well, section 3 of the process says that we have a form 32 and we complete this when we make a sale. Can you show me the last 5 that you've used? Again, it's collecting that evidence, and if the slightest deficiency or discrepancy on there, we need to raise it because it's important. Less we raise, the less value we're getting out of this audit. You want to know an example of where they've had to work outside of that process as well. And we want to know why it was outside of the process. We might want to know how easy it was to work outside of it. What were the circumstances? How did we plan it? There could be some really good information in there. Is it a non-conformance? If they've gone outside of the process until you see the evidence, you don't know, but it might definitely be an opportunity. You want to ask what parts of the process can be improved, and you want to know what do we do when something happens that isn't expected, and we've all been in situations where that happens. What you don't want to do is allocate yourself 30 to 60 minutes to do an audit of that particular department or process, because that's all you've got time for, because it's a waste of time. You may as well not bother. If you're going round, do you have a process? Yeah. Has anything changed since the last time? No. Okay. And that's it, job done. There's no value in that, because just because you have a process doesn't mean that we're following it. It doesn't mean we're understanding it. It doesn't mean we're aware of it. Another favourite that we hear is someone saying, I need to do an audit. Has anything unusual happened since last time? No. Can you give me 5 audit numbers? I just need them for my report. I found 3 or 5 examples were incorrect. I'm not going to write it down, but can you just fix it? Because I don't want the auditor to see. Don't worry if you can't find that procedure that you're working to. Just put something together for me and email it. So in regards to the final one of just putting something together and emailing it, if that's the process you're working to, we should know where it is. It goes to document control. It goes to awareness, potential leadership and communication as well. So that is worth raising. You should raise that. You should also raise if 3 out of 5 of the examples are not correct, because okay, there might be little situations around it, such as having to work outside of a process, but we should be looking into that. This is valuable data and valuable reasoning that will improve, and it's a non-conformance. It should be raised. So it's difficult when you know a process inside and out. So all you need to do is not pretend that you don't, but ask questions. So going back to the example of our process on the website of the complaints, these are questions I would expect to be asked, and I'd be shocked if I wasn't asked. But it also would show the auditor that hopefully I know what I'm talking about. So if you're presented with a process that you know or you don't know, you should still ask these questions, because it's not about whether you know or not. It's about whether the person who is using it or who has approved it knows. Now, bear in mind, if it's not a process you use all the time, it might be a bit of a task. So it's worth, at best, it's a refresh for somebody. Sorry, at worst, it's a refresh for somebody. At best, you might find that this is an obsolete thing. We don't do it anymore. It's just hanging about because it's not something that we use anymore. But you would ask for section 3.4, where anticipated time frame for completion succeeded. Well, what is the time frame? Show me how it's met. Show me how it's monitored. Show me the emails of the complaint being updated, and show me the investigation records for whatever that complaint was. was pertinent to. So again, it's fine people parroting a process back. You don't want them to parrot a process. You have a copy of that, you want to see it. Nothing else will do. And if there is any deviation, so it might be that if you look at mine, I've not kept the client up to date. That's a non-conformance. That needs raising. Show me how you verified information. Show the competence. And if it helps you in advance of the audit, so you know what you want to get out of it, because we discussed that at the beginning, and we looked at the risks of, or the important risks to you as a commercial venture or as an improvement venture or a compliance venture. So why not, as part of your planning, pull the processes that you need, go through it, find these questions so you're a little bit more prepared, because it's not you being audited, it's the person that you are speaking with. And it's not a test, of course. Part of the audit is to see, well, if they don't know the answers off the top of the head, they know where to find them, and they know it's correct and it's the right version, and they know who to go to if there's a problem with that process, and they know if there's a problem with the process owner, who to go to as well. So it all links in. Once you've done the audit itself, what you might want to consider is then putting a risk register together of the audit findings themselves. So again, I've made these up, they're not linked to anybody, but document control not seem to be affected in all areas. Old contract used, out of date, health and safety policy seen, waste transfer notes missing off system. Why is it risk? Because it can be requested by the HSE or Environment Agency, and a contract may be causing detriment, hence we changed it. So the effect puts us on the radar for external agencies. Costs may be incurred. Old contracts may have old clauses making void or costing us. Okay. Now what you'll notice is it doesn't mention anybody's name in there. It doesn't finger point. It's very factual. This is what we found. So it's not a person's fault, and this it's really must be very strong in your communication. We are auditing processes, not people. You might find there are behavioural issues, and you might find competence issues or not caring issues through the internal audit process. There's no denying that. But the purpose of it is we are looking at a process. So it's okay, because it's not identifying anybody in this, to communicate this with the business. It's okay for them to know what risks exist, and it's okay for them to know why it's a risk, and it's okay for them to know the effect that that risk poses. This is part of getting you buy-in. This is part of getting people to open up to you so that you can find where the bodies are buried, so that you can find the problems within the system. And it's got to come from the top. So if leadership are actually showing willing to make time and give people the time to do it, others in the business will follow suit. Use and improve the data that you've got. Okay, so once you've got your registered risk findings, you might want to consider assigning an educated guess to what cost would come from the health and safety executive, for example. You might want to put a mitigation in place to reduce the risk of it reoccurring, and you might want to delegate these risks to a specific owner to manage and review. But this is not your root cause and corrective action. This is a monitoring measure for you to see actually how well the business is doing and improvements. So your corrective action will be closely linked to your risk register, but your root cause, you have to find out why. Why was the risk? Why was the non-conformance? And please do not accept these woolly answers. These are real answers which have been received as what was the root cause? Human error. And that's all it says. Bob was off, showed wrong document, misunderstood process, no one told me, time pressures, brilliant. What does it tell us? Absolutely nothing. So what we want to find out from that root cause was, well, okay, if it was human error, well, what can the process do to prevent human error? Do we need software? Do we need reminders? Are there better quality checks that we can put in place? They showed you the wrong document. Well, how was it accessible? What can be done to prevent this? Is it incorrect? Documents shouldn't be in the system. Do we have a training issue? Did they know what they were being asked? And Bob being off, well, who can do Bob's job when he was off? This is a common one. Bob works in lots of places, let me tell you, and it is very difficult to get people to see the risk that Bob is very good at his job, but Bob poses a massive risk when he goes on holiday, and he should have holidays, but there should be a mechanism in place there that somebody can do his job, bless him, while he's away, or multiple people can take some of those duties. No one told me is a brilliant one. So we need to look at what processes we have in place to make sure that all employees are aware, and if they're not, the current one's failing. That should be a non-conformance in itself. So don't ask people, do you know what the quality policy is? They know where it is and they'll tell you where it is. Ask people about why we do stuff. Ask them, do you know why we do this? You see this process that you follow every day, or this work instruction, can you tell me about it? Show me what we do. Show me where we put these drawings. Show me where we put this. Why do we do it like that? Who taught you to do it like that? Really interrogate it. You will find that there are issues that you don't know about. The next part of your using it and improving it will then be to put maybe a cost on any time spent on root cause and corrective action, any rework that you've had to do, or the famous chasing people for paperwork for redoing root causes, because we're not accepting one-liners anymore, are we? We're not going to have that Bob's off, and we're not going to have the generic answers. Final thing before I go to the questions, because I can see there's a couple in there. As part of using and improving, we need to find the positives. And let me tell you, the non-conformances you find within your businesses are the biggest positives that you can get. Firstly, you're finding it before an external auditor. Secondly, the certificate and the system that you pay a lot of money for every year, it shows actually that there is a purpose to it, because things need changing. It's not an oiled machine which can just run and run and run. It has to change, and if it's changing, you're doing very well. It's good. Stagnation is not good for anybody. Tell people that they're doing well. If there's if there's departments that stand out and we've got rising stars, people who are doing a brilliant job, let them know this is an ideal forum for that. And what we can also find is things that are working well in the business, and can we replicate that somewhere else? It's really important. So it's not all about finding, oh, this doesn't conform, although it's a good thing that we do. It is about also recognizing the good parts of the business and thinking, right, well, that bit was brilliant. How do we make that fit everywhere else? So that's it. There's just so much to cover. Training resources we've got available, and training courses. I'm actually on one of their training courses today for medical devices. It's very good, actually. It's quite enjoyable. So I'd definitely give a shout out to training. I'm now going to go to your questions and answers, and I apologise, I've even run over 5 minutes. So let's have a little look. So in the plan effectively slide, it might seem obvious that the process owner cannot be the auditor of the process, but can the approver be an auditor of the process, or neither? That is an absolutely brilliant question. Okay, so if we go off you can't audit your own work is the first thing. So if the process owner, they own that process. So if we think about the complaints again, that example that we used, I can't have anything to do with auditing that process. I have to be the auditee because I use it. So all the inputs that go and the decisions that are made with that come from me. The approver is my boss. Now he's had a lot of input to that process, And if there's an issue with that process, I need to escalate it to him. So technically, he would be involved in auditing his own work as well. So my answer to that would be to completely keep impartiality, would be don't touch it if you are the process owner or the approver or the process user, because it is much more ethical, and also you'll get a better audit sample and better review. If, oh my goodness, we've got loads of questions. If you keep that separate is the answer. Now, how do we make this bigger? Good. So will it be answered in slides? Yes. Do you have some rough statistics about the percentage of companies doing it for improvement requirement or increase of earning opportunity? No, is the answer. I can tell you the okay, this is anecdotal purely. This is not a scientific thing at all. But the majority of answers that I get when people are being very, very honest is that they want it for improvement and because of requirements. The increased earning opportunity generally comes as a result of those two, but it is genuinely the third category that people have given me in the past, that they do feel it does give them an ability. That's not answered your question properly. I can't give you a figure, unfortunately, but I can do some digging if it's something that you specifically want and try and put a figure on for you without obviously divulging industry sectors or names. Do you use the auditor's body language when checking a process is working? I find their body language is a good way of checking awareness. Absolutely, yes. Now, the thing is, people do get nervous in audits, so it's not the most reliable check, but it's a very, very, very good check. So I don't often get flustered, and I love being audited. It's the only time in the year I actually get time to show off and say what I'm doing for the business, and I get really, really excited about it. However, you are absolutely right. Sometimes I've forgotten to do something, and sometimes you can see my body language and my face go completely given away, and I'll be useless at poker, and I just have to put my hand up and say, do you know what, I've been rubbish and I've forgotten to do that. But yeah, if someone's gone from very chatty to suddenly one word answers, not giving anything away, you know there's a finding there generally coming. Equally, if somebody doesn't want to show you their screen or has been a bit cagey, avoiding the question is a huge one. So you have to just keep going and asking the question. Don't move on just because they're avoiding that question. Just keep asking it over and over again, and you will find there's generally a finding there. That's an excellent question. So that's, yeah. Chris Smith, thank you. Medical devices, yes, is really interesting, Neil Morris, thank you. And a great question. So how can you keep impartiality in a small company where people carry out multiple roles? What an excellent, excellent, excellent question. Okay, right. If you have one designated internal auditor, then you would have to have somebody who would audit their role. So I think what you're referring to is if you went off my model of having a process owner, process user, and an approver there, so that's 3 people who potentially do lots of other jobs. You have to really draw the line in the sand to some extent. So I know a lot of businesses where they have a smaller amount of staff and they do wear several hats. They do it really well actually as well. Generally, it'll be the managing director who doesn't do as many boots on the ground activities. They will conduct the audit themselves. Difficulty is, as we've just discussed, often they've written the processes. So it might be the case that they will ask a consultant to come in and do those audits for them, so that there's no issues, because it can lead to findings. If we do find that somebody is a bit too close to the business, and actually there's a lot of benefit for a consultant coming in and doing that internal audit for you, because they have more time, again, than an external auditor, and they're able to bring experience with them and say, oh, this is how you can prove it. And they are not shy in delivering non-conformances as well, because they don't know you, they don't work with you every day, so it's like a dummy run. That would be my answer, but if it's not answered well enough, please come back to me, and I'm happy to have a chat with you to see if there's a better answer I can give you. How to eliminate the risk of an NC being found by external auditor. Good internal audits, good management review, there are blueprints. So to be fair with you, if you've got a really detailed management review, a lot of that we will look at and think, yeah, this company's on with it, they know what they're doing. We will still audit, obviously, and effectively go through, but it tells us a good story to start with. And it's the same with the internal audits, how you present them. So if you've got one sheet of A4 per audit and it's just a tick checklist, or yes, we looked at this, we have to ask more in-depth questions, because we don't know the answers. You've not shown us any. Oh, so in relation to keeping impartiality, what about micro business who have only two or three staff? Yeah, that is going to be difficult for you, there's no doubt about it. But what you can do, again, you can look at getting a consultant to come in. That might be quite expensive for a micro business. You might be earning 8 million a week, so please forgive me if that sounded disrespectful in any way, shape or form. The only way that you can do that is audit each other, of course. But again, what I'd say is go back to the processes, study them a little bit. Like I showed you with that example with our complaints process, pull out your questions before you go through, before you observe the role, and see what do we actually know. It's probably more difficult in a small group as well, so maybe things might get taken a bit personally. So maybe have a lunch or something at the end of audit week. That might also help you keep relationships, and also help keep the openness as well, that the audit's not a punishment if there's a finding, it's an improvement. I've worked. Okay, brilliant. So, like in most places I've worked, it's always been that I do all the QHSE documentation, although I base this on conversations with others. Some auditors only with me. There's no appetite for another auditor, so I have to audit by myself. But I do find non-conformances in my work. This cannot be avoided. Okay, I think what I would say to that is, well done that you're actually finding the non-conformances to start with and you're raising them. That's really, really good. If you consider the idea of the risk to the audit plan, that risk register, again, if you're able to present that to top management that it is a risk, either that it's a lot of work for one person, it really, really is, and you seem to be managing very well with it and able to, you know, sort of provide value back to the company by making those findings. I'd love to know if they're the same findings every year, or do we manage to correct them? But I would certainly say that a risk register is a powerful tool that as long as you're making senior management aware of the risk of impartiality, because surely there has to be another auditor to audit your work. Yeah, get in touch with me if you want to have a further chat on that, and I'll see if there's a better answer that I can I can give you. I need to think on that a little bit, I'll be honest, but yeah, you should have another internal auditor at least to audit your work. That's a tricky situation. Okay, how would you globally change the perception of audits and associated findings being seen as a negative rather than a positive? Try and spin this as usually the longest part of the audit. Okay, so I think the okay, yeah. So I think as human beings, we don't like criticism. Everything feels like criticism when we raise things. It's not a nice feeling when you get a non-conformance, of course it's not. But it's how we as businesses react to those, perhaps. So we had this in health and safety, didn't we, with near misses? It was never something that you should do. It was admitting a weakness within the systems. It was admitting a weakness within camaraderie, and you're a snitch, you're blowing people up. What is the most recognised part of health and safety systems and monitoring now, or one of the most? It's near misses. People just have to get on board, and the reason that it's probably got a little bit better with the near misses that nobody wanted to report is the way that businesses have reacted to that. And I think you really need to plan that. Incentivize your business to actually reward most improved departments, perhaps, or the ones who are actually going to say, do you know what, you've got this written here, but unfortunately I don't follow that because it's rubbish. And find out what you do actually do. There's lots and lots of benefits, but there will always be people who see an internal audit as a witch hunt and a blaming session. There's not a lot that you can do, really. It's on them. If you're reacting positively and you're providing that incentive, then it's just one of those things. So I think I've answered all those questions. If you think of anything else, by all means, get in touch, drop us a line, and always happy to answer more. That's not a problem. Thank you for joining me. Apologies that I've run over. We've got a little bit late. As ever, it's been a joy, and thank you very much. Have a great afternoon.